You're listening to The Voice of Reason with Mark Reed and Ted Durden, only on LA Talk Radio.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Voice of Reason. My name is Ted Durden, a Southern Democrat.
And my name is Mark Reed, a West Coast Republican.
And together, we are The Voice of Reason. For those of you tuning in for the very first time, this is a politically motivated podcast where civil discourse is the order of the day. For Mark and I find that we have more things that unite us than we do that divide us. And having said that, as I do every week, I'll toss it over to my co-host, Mark Reed.
I'm going to resurrect a monologue I did right after the coronavirus hit. And you're probably going to remember this one.
Okay,
right?
all right.
And that is the United States committing economic suicide? Houston, we have a problem. The problem is COVID-19, named for the coronavirus disease 2019, first identified in Wuhan City, China. Our government is taking actions which appear to be excessive and misguided based on the concept of cost versus benefits. These actions, at a minimum, are shutting down portions of our economy. The ambiguities of the unintended consequences are extremely problematic in that the cost of these actions are massive and may become severe enough to cause a recession or even a depression. What value do we expect to receive from these actions? Based on the most recent evidence, it appears this virus is most damaging to the elderly, especially those with medical problems. What is the cost of the common sense concepts of washing your hands, staying home if you're sick, identifying at-risk signs, high fever, coughing, and a sore throat, reacting appropriately, adjusting protocols at nursing homes, reasonably segregating at-risk persons? Can we make a rational extrapolation of these common sense costs and compare to those which will result from the proposed protocols? The value differential must be evaluated. The accumulated comparative data should inform our adjusted actions. We probably have the requisite evidence to guide us on how we should expend our energies most effectively and efficiently to mitigate the damages which will be caused by the virus. There are now 5,000 deaths. Can you imagine that? When I read this, it was only 5,000 deaths worldwide and climbing. What is the year's total? We're 300,000. What that cost rationally necessitate our shutting down our normal activities? The World Health Organization estimates the worldwide annual influenza epidemics result in about 3 to 5 million cases of severe illnesses and about 250,000 to 500,000 deaths. Using 4 million cases and 375,000 deaths, it shows a mortality rate of 9.375%. Once again, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself by FDR. Let us use common sense in getting back to living. We've watched now, since this monologue, we've watched the government do all kinds of things. The coronavirus is not killing our economy, but our elected officials are killing our economy. Mm-hmm. We're watching the average person, who most of them live paycheck to paycheck, are now going through massive depression. Suicides, they're not reporting on the suicides. You're watching here in the San Fernando Valley a major rise in crime, armed robberies of gas stations and 7-Elevens. I've driven through some of the areas and seen food lines as if we were living in the Soviet Union or in Venezuela. You know, you're looking at outward rebellion that some of these governors are really coming out and getting aggressive with.
Right.
And even my opponent remained quiet. And I'm going to call him out on this one here. My opponent remained quiet in the recent tweet about Bill de Blasio, Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York. He writes this in a tweet: "My message to the Jewish community and all the communities is this simple. This time, the time for warning has passed. I have instructed the NYPD to proceed immediately to summons or even arrest those who gather in large groups. This is about stopping this disease and saving lives, period. This was because it was an Hasidic funeral out in New York.
Okay.
And they were, the very traditional,
Right.
Guidelines for burying their dead. And they all observed. They had the mask on. They were social distancing. And he sends this out. Where is my Jewish opponent on this one, condemning it? He's been silent constantly. In fact, he even came out recently because in the, how would you say, the stimulus packages, remember we brought it out, the numerous amounts of pieces of legislation in regards to the voting.
The pork.
Yeah. Well, it's just not only the pork. There was a lot of money. That's kind of giving the cake and calling it bread, to the masses.
Right.
I personally think, Ted, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think all these son of a guns, and I won't get nasty, but these son of a guns need to get their pants back on and go to work. I think we should pull their paychecks away from them. They're making $175,000 a year. Let's pull their paychecks away from them, give them a measly $1,200 and tell them to live on 10 weeks.
I agree with you there.
Right?
Yeah.
And look at all the businesses that are destroying. Oh, out in Maine, the guy came out. He's got the #1 restaurant in Maine. He said, screw you. Because the governor of Maine said, you know what? You're staying closed. It is the law. How can they usurp our constitutional rights if they lay out guidelines of social distancing, wearing masks? The guy has a huge restaurant. He's separating the tables 6 feet apart. Nobody, only groups of the families can come in there. And that's it.
Well, I tell you what it makes me think of. I don't know if you ever saw that movie V. But the movie V was about this gentleman who aspired to power. Right. And he created a national crisis. And as a result of that national crisis, a lot of our civil liberties were taken away. In the name of protection, it was done. Because if you remember, when Bush was in office, and when he enacted the Patriot Act to monitor phone calls, there was a real big furor from the ACLU. Well, where are they now? We've got almost 30 million people that are out of work that have filed for unemployment. And I know that's not indicative of the actual amount, because there are a lot of people that don't file for unemployment.
3 million just in California.
Right, and this is what I mean. And so you look at the amount of money that's being lost. You look at people, and we talked about this on the show last week, about food banks running out of food because there's been such a run because people cannot afford to feed themselves. At some point, it becomes a choice between medication and eating.
Well, the cost versus benefit.
Right.
As the monologue stated.
And so even I was happy when I heard that Ventura and Orange County opened up their beaches, because we are not an authoritarian, totalitarian society. We're a democracy.
Well, Gavin Newsom came out today and shut down the beaches in Orange County.
He did a hard close and dared the mayor of any of the affected cities, Ventura out in Orange County, and dared them to reopen. I mean, this is not the America that any of us know, that we grew up in, where all of our choices are being taken away. I believe, and we've said this time and time again, we're both in agreement that just use a common sense approach. Businesses need to reopen. America has got to go back to work, because the reality is a lot of these jobs will never come back. They'll never come back. A lot of these businesses, restaurants, they'll never recover. They're never going to come back, because by the time they do, they're going to be so far behind the 8 ball, they won't be able to rehire the same employees that they did. This is a catastrophe.
Well, some of these employers are actually starting to complain right now because their employees are telling them, look, I'm not coming back to work. I'm making $400, $500 a week on unemployment. I'm getting $600 from the feds. I'm making more money than I would if I came back to work for you.
Right.
And it's going to go on until July. Now, what you were talking about is it's a globalist propaganda aspect, and that is they create a massive problem. Mm-hmm. Okay, they watch the reaction of the people, and then they come in and they give solutions, right? And it's about control. It's control and authoritarian control that they're manipulating on. Now, this is, I had to pull it up real fast.
And just real quick, is control through fear.
Absolutely.
It's control through fear.
You nailed it right on the head. So this is his last Facebook post. This is Congressman BS here. That's his initials, my opponent, right?
Right.
Which he will be too chicken to ever debate me. I'll eat him up for lunch, this coward. He writes, the CDC director says possible second wave of the coronavirus could be worst. When might a second wave hit? November? We must expand vote by mail through November so that the Americans won't be forced to choose between their health and exercising their constitutional right to vote. Look, if I want to go to my poll and vote, I'm going to put a mask on and go to my poll and vote.
Absolutely.
Well, what the hell? Right? They'll have Purell there. I'll wash my hands when I get done because of touching the screen, and I'll get the hell out of there.
And you see,
right?
and again, he's what was the phrase?
Well,
I can't, but here, I'm going to call BS on that. And the reason I call BS on that is because the Pouchy, is that his name, Pouchy? The guy, the one
Pucci,
yeah,
with an F.
Okay,
Faucci, I believe.
So he came out. He actually said that we can possibly expect a second wave in August, not November. And this is what I mean.
Yeah, but because all the data they've gathered, they're going to be able to, as the group has said, the coronavirus task force has said, we'll be able to put it out before it really gets going. Because they have it all in place now.
And I find it interesting. He made no mention of what's going on in Rhodes, where they have just about come with a vaccine. They've tested the vaccine very successfully on monkeys.
Right.
And so it looks like if everything proceeds in the same manner that is going, we could have a vaccine before August, before November comes along. And trust me, once that happens, with all expediency, they're going to get this out to the masses.
I'm going to read a couple of the responses on his Facebook.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
You got to wonder how this guy gets reelected all the time. The responses is great. More voter fraud. Hell, no, we can go to the polls. That was one. Another one, vote this, do nothing out of office. Another one, Brad, where is outrage at the FBI emails released today? I mean, that General Flynn is a whole other thing, right? I mean,
Right.
that showed the exact corruption. And Sherman was all part of it because he wanted to impeach President Trump for obstruction of justice for firing Comey. And this may end up being the biggest scandal ever, is James Comey directing the FBI, participating in FISA abuse, participating in fraudulent documentation going to FISA, participating in setting up General Flynn by sending two of his FBI agents into the Oval Office to interview General Flynn without following any of the normal protocols. Okay, but let's go on here. Brad, let's see. It says, Brad, what did you know about the crosswind and wind? What was your role? Yeah, it goes on and on. This guy gets slammed constantly. Brad, what do you say about Tara Reid? That's another one.
Oh yeah.
Right? This is the thing. Nobody's asking questions about the Tara Reid. It's like, wait a minute. What was the outrage? Where's the outrage of all the Democrats about, female abuse, by males in power? Where's it at? This is confirmed. Democrats got so ticked off at Kavanaugh for maybe I think I was molested by somebody at a frat house party, and I don't really remember how long ago it was.
Well, see here.
And I don't know how I got there. I don't know how I got home. And I think it might have been Kavanaugh. And that was a big hoop too.
And see, and
right?
this is what happens when you end up hanging yourself by your own petard, because of the fact that I looked at some of the things that happened with the Me Too movement. I'm not trying to minimize what happened on those legitimate cases. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying
this BS that's gone on in the Kavanaugh hearings. What's happening now is extremely devastating to all women who have a real complaint.
And I'm not saying. And my point is this. And I think the problem that Tara Reid faces is the one question that she has had some difficulty answering is, why did you wait 30 years? She makes me think of Anita Hill with the way that
Tara Reid, she didn't wait 30 years.
Yes, she did.
She called in to Larry King's right? Wait a minute. She called in Larry King. She also told the people at her office. The people at her office are now coming out and confirming that she told him. She ended up getting transferred from her existing position of overseeing people in the office, and then she got canned.
No, what I'm talking about is this is a story that should have gained national attention at the time that it occurred. Because she admitted when she first told the story, she did not discuss the physical contact. She didn't talk about that.
She did to her close associates.
Well, to her close, but what I'm saying, but my point is this:
right.
When she reported it, she didn't report the physical contact, and she should have. She talked about the harassment.
Well, let me bring this to you.
Okay.
My opponent, even the colleges are coming out and telling the graduates from poli-sci classes don't go to work for him because he's a political liability. You spend 4 years in college, up to 6 years getting certain degrees in college, and then you want to dive into poli-sci, get into the political arena,
right.
And you go to work for a moron that has and this is all over the press with my opponent.
We're talking about
I'm talking about my opponent, okay, and it's all over the place because of 3 of his staffers and everything else that went on. That he created such a atmosphere of hostility.
Yeah, toxic atmosphere. I heard about
atmosphere
that.
That they did not want to report. They just wanted to do their tenure, get the hell out of there, and go to somebody else's office. Because if you complain, you're never going to get hired by another congressman. You're not going to work on the Hill. You just given up 6 years of your life. So they don't complain. This is why Harvey Weinstein. And the other guy that hung himself supposedly hung himself in the prison, right?
Right, yeah.
The reasons why nobody says anything because they're worried about the amount of time and effort they put into a career. If they complain about it, bring it forward, they're going to get shut down.
It's like the same thing with Bill Cosby.
Yes.
Why nobody came
and
forward
this
for
is
years.
this is why Jane Fonda came out and said, well, I knew what was going on, but and then they asked her, well, why didn't you say something? Well, it didn't happen to me. This is the Democrats. This is why I say one day you're going to fill out at least an independent registration. I know you're party loyal. You really are.
Yes, I am.
But this Democrat Party, as you have known it in the past, is no longer the party that your dad knew.
No.
Or what you
It's
signed
not-
up
it's not
for.
the- it's not the party I grew up with.
Yeah.
It's not the party I
The one
grew
you
up with.
signed up with, 45 some odd years ago, right?
Yeah,
I'm not going to give away your age here at all.
And the funny thing is, in high school, I was actually on a political committee called Teen Democrats.
Yeah.
I was back in the day.
Well, I remember,
this is not the party I grew up
I
with.
remember doing an interview with a gal, and she was the head of the Young Democrat Party, and she got into, well, you darn Republicans tell me what to do with my body. And I looked at her, I said, really? I said, what? I said, if you want to go have sex, you can go have sex, right? She goes, yeah. I said, well, and if you want to have multiple partners, you can have multiple partners if you want to. Yeah. Are any Republicans telling you can't? Well, no. You can go out and buy all the contraceptives you want, right? Yeah. You can go out and get an abortion if you want to, too, right? Well, yeah. Any Republicans telling you can't? Well, no. I said, well, then the big problem that you have is you want somebody else to pay.
There you go.
You want someone else to pay. I don't want to tell anybody how to live their lives.
Right.
I have my set of rules that I live by. Okay, and I'm not going to tell you have to live by them. That's not what America's about.
No, it isn't.
I live by my rules, by
Right.
my morals, my standards.
Absolutely.
But I'm not going to tell you how to live.
Right.
Okay, so this whole thing is just, if you want it, go buy it, go pay for it. Don't expect me to pay for your mistakes. I have 3 children. I don't want 359 million children.
I heard that.
Right?
Yeah.
We're going to go to our first advertisement, and we'll be right back.
My erstwhile opponent says I don't accept debate invitations. I accept the League of Women Voters invitation.
The League of Women Voters LA chapter was the one who invited him to the 5 debates with the battered women's organization, with a synagogue, 2 churches, and the American Legion. And he turned down them all flat with the League of Women Voters. Welcome back to the Voice of Reason. We're getting into some interesting conversations here. You lock us up in the house for too long, we come out and we got to let it out just a little bit. Especially I've been, it's been a rough week for me, actually. When you got all kinds of money going out and you have no money coming in, it gets a little difficult.
Yeah, it does.
And it's not because I don't, work. It's like I want to go to work. I want to take care of business. I can't throw out renters, because it's not right to. Number one, they've been knocked out of employment, but my mortgage banks still want their money.
Yeah, they do.
One way or the other. But in the beginning of this whole episode of this pandemic, and it's kind of funny, and this is where the gnat's attention of the American people is so short, and they don't remember, that the World Health Organization was notified of this pandemic, or not the pandemic, just an unknown pneumonia,
right,
in January 6th of this year. They withheld the information from at least the beginning of December. World Health Organization covered it up, kind of covered China's back. All kinds of interesting things took place pertaining to China's actions of allowing everybody from Wuhan, whoever wanted to leave Wuhan, they could leave Wuhan to anywhere in the world but other places in China. All through January, they bought up all the PPE that they can get their hands on. They got rid of the first scientists that started talking about it. The other two scientists are gone. They don't know where they're at.
Right.
They haven't been confirmed that they're dead yet. All the first testings of the coronavirus are gone. Mm-hmm. All the lab work from the Wuhan virology lab is gone. They don't know where it's at. You can't get in there. Okay. And then you have our politicians here. Now, granted, in the beginning, I can say, okay, you have a bunch of false information coming in, so there's going to be some mistakes made by the president, by the administration, by even Democrats. Saying, because they're going off of bad information. I'll give them that much. Mm-hmm. Okay, but by middle January, they were being told there's a serious problem coming about.
Right.
Okay, by the end of January, right, when President Trump, it was confirmed, it was a pandemic, okay? The World Health Organization said, we got a serious problem here, it's a pandemic. We need to start taking precautions, right? After that, both parties should have taken it very serious.
They should have.
But they didn't, okay? They were still stuck on this mode of, it's President Trump, we're going to reject anything that he says, we're going to reject anything that he does, we're going to do whatever we possibly can to bury this guy. So as soon as President Trump came out on January 30th to ban incoming flights,
right?
Okay, from Wuhan, mainly from Wuhan to begin with, mm-hmm. right? And it was only Chinese people,
right?
Okay, American citizens can come back. They were allowed to come back. Right. They're Americans. We want them here to take care of them.
And just to backstop you on this real quick, the reason that was done is because the first incident of coronavirus occurred outside of China, and that was in Thailand.
Yes.
That was the reason why he did it. Go ahead, Mark.
That's right. Okay, so then you looked at the responses that took place, Nancy Pelosi's responses, de Blasio and Como in New York, all of them coming out. Oh, no, it's okay, go ahead. This is in February. Joe Biden had a massive rally, and I believe it was in Chicago, in February 14th.
I think so.
Right, and didn't postpone it, didn't do anything. They didn't take it seriously. Okay, they just kept pushing on because to them, whatever they have to do for power, they're going to do for power. And that's why I say it's not the Democrat Party. Okay, it's the Democrat leadership. And there's a huge distinction. Right. This is the distinction I think everybody has to have when they're looking at it, this Wuhan virus, okay? The Chinese Communist Party is not the Chinese people. The Chinese Communist Party has a massive agenda, and they could care less about their own people. They can care less about the world population. They could care less about what their agenda is. That's the only thing they care about. So when I talk about it, don't start saying that I'm racist, as the Democrats did with President Trump. He was a racist, he was a xenophobe, he was a this, and he was a that, and he wants to ban travel, and it's like, kiss my backside. Understand governments. The Chinese government, the Communist Party of China, is not a friend to America.
No, they're not. Not at all.
There are 5 permanent seats on the Security Council of the UN. Two of them are not friends of America.
Right,
They're
China and
enemies
Russia.
they're enemies of America.
Right.
Russia bankrupt themselves. They're not a big threat, but they got a lot of nuclear weapons, so they're still kind of a threat out there, and they want to reconstitute their power.
Right.
China, for the last 50 years, has made it extremely clear. We are going to dominate the world economically and militarily. Their first domino is economically, and we've talked about it on the past episodes with Dr. Wen Chen, who's going to be back on the show in a couple minutes here. But Nancy Pelosi, come out with this one here. Nancy Pelosi on July 31st tweeted out.
January 31st.
January, not July. January 31st, thank you. In the coming weeks, the House will bring the No Ban Act to the floor to prohibit religious discrimination in our immigration system and limit the president's ability to impose such bias and bigoted restrictions. That was a piece of legislation, the Democrat leadership, and they voted on it. My opponent voted yes on this. They wanted to take away his ability to protect America.
And that's all he was doing.
That's all he was doing. Okay, and they don't think borders don't, the virus respects borders if it can't get across the border. How does it get across the border?
Yeah, it's like secondhand.
Someone's got to walk across, right? And then you look at what Joe Biden, I love this one here. Joe Biden, this is like 4 points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points of Biden. And this is their great white hope.
I'm glad you said that, not me.
There's no racism involved here. This is the great white hope.
Not to be confused with great white dope, but then
senior citizen Joe Biden. Joe Biden rambled and struggled for words during a CNN interview on Thursday about the coronavirus response, which he's never been questioned about, actually. Speaking to Anderson Cooper and Dr. Sanjay Gupta, Biden stumbled his way through the evening interview. The former VP was asked his thoughts about President Trump's three-phase plan to reopen the country. He didn't have an answer to it. He didn't. Biden said, there during World War II, where Roosevelt came up with the thing that was totally different than it's called, and this is a straight transcript. He called it the World War II. He had the war. He had the War Production Board. That was his answer. But come on, President Trump, okay, mind you, he kind of does some interesting rambling, soundbite stuff.
He does.
But at least it's somewhat coherent.
He does.
It's bodacious, right? On a lot of very, over the top and a lot of stuff.
Right.
But let me read that again. Biden said, there's, during World War II, where Roosevelt came up with the thing that, was totally different than it's called. He called it the World War II. He had the War Production Board.
Now, that's not the first time he's been asked about the virus, though. He was asked about the virus once before, and I think it was on The View. And again, it was almost it wasn't as bad as this, but it was pretty bad. I mean, he rambled. He made statements.
President Trump?
No, Biden.
Biden.
He said it made absolutely no sense. It's like he suffers from word salad, where you just say stuff that just makes no sense whatsoever.
Oh, I think he needs to have a physical and be really checked out. It's serious for him.
Look,
for his own thing.
And I'm just gonna say this. I'm gonna let you. Let me just. I gotta throw my bar. I don't care how much plastic surgery you have. I don't care how young you look. It's your mental acuity that we need. Anyway, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah. And then the last one is Donald Trump caught wind of the segment, sharing the clip with his fellow followers on Twitter. Writes, debate's going to be fire. I actually feel sorry for him. This is why they're pushing so hard for the vote by mail. Now, enough with that. We've been having fun. I've been railing on the Democrat leadership quite heavily, and my opponent, I don't know why people vote for this moron. I really don't. I hope he can come out of his foxhole. He's practicing social distancing. He hasn't come back to his district during this whole pandemic. He's over in D.C. He's staying there. He's hiding. He does these telephone town halls called the Coronavirus Town Hall, which is a lot of misinformation and garbage. And you can see his Facebook post, which that's right. I read it already.
Yeah.
The Facebook post that he puts on there, trying to create everybody fear. Let's do vote by mail, because they know that's where the fraud is at.
Well,
I've identified it quite heavily with it.
And I'm just going to say this, just as an interesting comparison.
Right.
I don't care what you may say about VP Pence. He has been visiting hospitals. He has been visiting the elderly, and he does so without a mask. And like you said,
well, he's tested every couple of days.
Yeah, but your opponent, well, where is he at? I've never liked the guy. I never have. So where is he at? He's a ghost in the wind.
Yeah,
he's a ghost in the wind. Anyway, go ahead, Mark.
Well, he's definitely not covering his major constituency, his fellow Jews in the district, because the Blasio coming out with that comment after an acidic
funeral. Right.
Funeral. It's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's beyond the pale.
Yeah, it really is. When we come back from our advertisements, we have Dr. Wen Chen, biologist and information scientist in genomics and biographical research. I hope I bastardize certain words, because I have a plate in my mouth, so it's very difficult sometimes. But anyways, when we return from the advertisements, we will have her sitting with us, and we're going to be discussing a very, very important topic.
Yes, we are.
Hi, I want to welcome Rusty Levin and Harry Nabanian, both trial lawyers for workman comp cases. If you're injured on the job, don't hesitate. Contact an attorney. I did when I was wounded or injured on my job, and I thought I would trust my employer, and it didn't work out quite well. So I found Rusty Levin, handled my case like a professional, worked out way better than any other lawyer that I talked to would have worked out. So Rusty, tell us a little bit about your company of Levin and Nabanian Trial Lawyers.
So at our firm, at Levin Nabanian Trial Lawyers, we handle all matters of workers' compensation, personal injury, and employment disputes, wrongful termination matters, and things like that. We were able to help Mr. Reed out with his workers' compensation case. Unfortunately, workers' compensation injury can be very stressful, intense situation. And at Levin Nabanian, we try to get you the most benefit we can of the law, while also easing the stress and anxiety that comes along with that situation, and getting you back on your feet. My partner, Mr. Nabanian, he handles the personal injury sides, and I'll let him take it from there.
And just like all injured employees out there, anybody else who gets injured as a result of somebody else's negligence has rights, and the rights that they need to protect immediately. And they should do that by calling Levin and Nabanian Trial Lawyers and letting us help ease that tension off of you and get you the result you deserve, while also making sure that you get better in the progress. So we're here for you, folks.
Levin and Nabanian Trial Lawyers is the best company for you to get a hold of when you're injured or have a personal injury. So give them a call at
213-232-4848, 213-232-4848. Thank you.
And let them handle the stress for you while you recover at home. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Hi, my name is Ted Durden, and I want to take a moment to talk to you about trust, and I trust TurchinLaw.com. When it comes to workers' compensation and employment law, you can trust TurchinLaw.com. If you ever need legal advice you can rely on, it's TurchinLaw.com. Black and white, no gray, TurchinLaw.com. 818-230-3110. TurchinLaw.com. A law firm you can trust and count on.
Welcome back to the Voice of Reason, and thank you for coming back. We've been having so much fun with you coming in here, but it's a lot of very valuable information about China, because I've been talking about China for 12 years now myself, And I've heard about you and from Yan, and also another a very important person I've listened to quite a bit is Gordon Cheng. And he's actually going to be on the show next week. It's Gordon Cheng. We're going to be very honored with his presence via the phone because he's on the East Coast. But there's so much about China because of the misconceptions between the Communist Party of China and the Chinese people. Most people, when they come across a Chinese person, you actually fall in love with them. They're very genuine people. Mm-hmm. And so it's very difficult to realize that the Communist Party is so brutal, so, how would you say, the human rights violations, the murders, the organ harvesting, and so forth. It's horrible. So before we start into the interview, we're going to play a trailer of a documentary that we're going to talk about a little bit. So go ahead, Sam, and play that trailer. Welcome back to the Voice of Reason. Had a little technical difficulty with the trailer on there, but we're going to play it a little bit later, and we'll fix that difficulty there. Ted, go ahead and give a synopsis of what we're going to be discussing with the documentary.
The documentary is that you just saw the trailer from, which is basically called The Letter from Masanjia. And in 2012, Julie Keith of Damascus, Oregon, went to the store. Any other day, it was that time of year to put up Halloween decorations. Well, when she got home and she opened up the box, she found a letter in the box. And the letter was from Sun Yi, from a Chinese labor camp in Masanjia. And it was in the northeast province of Liaoning. Now, when she first saw it, she thought it was a prank, but it turned out that it wasn't. This is a letter that was written by a man who was being forced into Chinese labor. And in that letter, he asked Julie Keith, to bring his story, to bring it and put it on the world stage. And that's exactly what she did. It took some time, but it finally gained notoriety. And we're going to have Dr. Chen talk about what happened as a result of that.
Okay, I want to share a little bit of story about this man who wrote this letter. His name was Stringy. He was an engineer in China. Mm-hmm. And he lived a peaceful life until the Chinese government started to persecute Falun Gong in 1999. Because he was an engineer, he was very good at the computer. So all these years, he had been teaching other people how to bypass the Great Firewall on internet to access outside information. And that was the main reason that the Chinese government targeted him, because the Communist Party has been the most afraid of Chinese people from getting out of the brainwash. They have been blocking the internet, right? So Shunyi had been fixing computers, installing softwares for many, many people in the community. And before the Beijing Olympics, he was arrested by the government, and because Chinese government wanted to put as many dissidents to prison as possible before the Olympics. He was sentenced to 30 months in labor camp. So this labor camp system means like the police can arrest anyone in the community without any legal procedure, then decide how many years they should be imprisoned. And when Sun Yi was in the Masanjia Labor Camp, he went through many torture. Like, do you want to show the picture?
Right.
The first picture. Yeah, go ahead and show the first picture.
The first picture is Sun Yi took the picture of the Masanjia Labor Camp after he was released, and with him standing in front of that labor camp. So this labor camp detained thousands of people. Like most of them were Falun Gong practitioners. There were also some other people, basically without any legal procedure, anyone can be put there. And everyone in the labor camp had to work 15 hours per day. And their salary was $1.61 per month.
Per month?
Per month. So basically they work for free for 15 hours per day with no rest, with no Saturday, no Sunday. And they produce products that were exported to other countries. And of course, Shun Yi, as an educated, he got his bachelor degree from engineer. He was able to read English. So he realized all these products, holiday decorations, were to be sent to other countries. So he came up with this idea that he must do something about it, because he witnessed a lot of torture. Do you want to show the second picture of torture?
Yes, let's go ahead and do that.
Yeah, the second picture of torture. So in Masanjia Labor Camp, people were not only required to work, they were also required to give up their political view or give up their practice of, especially Falun Gong. And the labor camp had been using many kinds of torture methods to force people to give up, just to make them, feel physical pain or mental pain. So this drawing, this sketch was made by Sun Yi himself, because he was an engineer. He was very good at this. Is part of his training to draw. So this is what he drew by himself, about what he went through in labor camp. Basically, it's called stretch torture. They stretch human bodies to the extreme and keep you in that position for hours, for days. So in this kind of stretch position, they tied prisoners' hands and feet to a bed and to a very, it's stretching really hard and make you feel pain. And Sun Yi was put in that kind of position for 8 days and 9 nights. And he's
continuous, 24 hours.
And for those of you who have watched movies like Braveheart, that's what they did in the medieval times. The English did that. They would put them on a table, and they had rollers at each end, attach ropes to your extremities, your arms, your legs, and literally stretch your body. Pull your arms out of joints.
But this sketch that was drawn, you on those that you're talking about, you're actually laying down on a table and they stretch you out.
This one you're standing up.
These they're standing up and they're hanging by their body weight.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's constant body weight. So if they're using ties, it's all transferred right to your wrists, it's your legs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's extremely painful.
And they couldn't sleep, because once you fall asleep, your body weight pull you down, and then basically the handcuff will cuff into your flesh, and then was so much pain that they would wake up. And so basically, Sun Yi was very, very quiet. He was a very, very quiet man. He was the kind of man who never, say anything. He was quietly endure all this torture. And also, because of all of this, he decided, he must write letters to let people know, because he knew all these products would be shipped to other countries. So if he can smuggle some message out, maybe someone would know what's going on. But it was almost impossible, right? Because they were watched all the time. So if you look at, do you want to show the third picture? This is a sketch.
Sam?
The third picture, The third picture was also drawn by Sun Yi himself, about how he wrote the letters. So basically at night, whenever was sleeping time. He like smuggled like a pen and a couple pieces of paper. He had to write it in like on his bed with himself, like little by little. He wrote the letter. Once like the guard approached them, he had to stop, and he had to make sure that he made no noise. So it was so difficult to write each letter. Each letter, it just looked like a piece of paper with a few sentences. Each letter would take him 2 or 3 nights to finish, because he had to be very, very careful. His body position had to be in a very strange position, like made outsiders look at him, say, oh, he was sleeping, but actually he was writing the letter without moving his body. And he was only able to write about 20 letters and to insert them into the declarations. And fortunately, one of them was discovered by Julie. Right. And Julie, made this letter public and called worldwide attention. So by the time in 2012, when Julie made this letter public, Sun Yi already left the labor camp. He was detained for 2.5 years, and he was already back to his house. And but then his wife already had to file divorce from him, because in China the Communist Party persecuted individual by punishing their family. So after Sun Yi was taken into prison, taken into labor camp, the Communist Party, the Chinese government, had been constantly harassing his wife, his parents-in-law, and his wife's younger brother was arrested. And he didn't do anything wrong. He was just a brother. Right. his brother.
That was the offense. He was the brother.
He was a brother.
Wow.
And as a result, his wife had to file divorce when he was in prison, although they had been in love for
And that was to avoid persecution.
Yeah, she had to file divorce, but when his wife eventually wrote him a letter when he was in the labor camp, she wrote the letter say, I had to file divorce. I'm no longer your wife, and of course Sun Yi knew why she had to file divorce.
Right.
So Sun Yi kept this letter as a love letter. So. Later on, after he came back, he told the reporters, when I was in prison, that letter from my wife was the only connection, only memory I kept with the outside world. Whenever I read that divorce letter, I regard it as a love letter. And whenever he thought he was not able to endure the pain, he would read his wife's divorce letter and regard it as a mental support from his wife. And so after he was released, finally, when he read, Sun Yi was an engineer, as I mentioned at the beginning, he was able to bypass the Great Firewall to figure out what's going on. And of course, he read the reports about that SOS letter. He was surprised to find out that, hey, that was one of my letters.
Right.
And he was very excited. And he happened to know a friend who used to work for New York Times. So through this friend, he was able to connect with CNN. And so CNN reporter in China secretly interviewed him about his experience in the labor camp. That was in 2013 or so. And of course, that news went viral. Also, it went viral like everyone. Of course, he used his nickname. He didn't use his real name to protect his identity at that time. And even inside China, some Chinese reporters, who felt sympathetic towards his experience, they also interviewed other victims from Masanjia. And there were quite a few very, very brave news reports in Chinese media. Of course, after they were published, immediately they were wiped out by the Chinese government. But under the international pressure in 2013, China abolished the labor camp system.
Yeah, but they're just calling it something different now.
Yeah, well, they
Falun
had
Gong and the weekend.
Yeah, but at least
Uyghurs.
they can no longer openly use the labor camp system. The Masanjia Labor Camp, they had to dismiss everyone. Right. Let them go home. But basically, they renamed the Masanjia Labor Camp into Masanjia Prison later on. Well, they say okay, officially you have to go through the trial and then go to the court and then be sentenced to Masanjia Prison instead let the police send people directly to Masanjia. Right. But after all, it was a success to Sun Yi because eventually, like he defeated the system
Right.
to remove the labor camp system. And actually, after Sun Yi was released, he was connected with a Canadian director called Leon Lee. Leon had made quite a few human rights films about China. So Leon taught him how to use camera to make some footages. So when Sun Yi took quite a few footages about the labor camps in China, his daily life in China. And so that documentary is called The Letter from Masanjia, and that's what the trailer was about. And you can find it from Amazon. You can watch it. It's not free, but like with a couple of dollars.
It's a couple of dollars. Not,
you
not
can watch
expensive.
the film. It's very, very helpful. Like, when I watched that movie, I actually hosted a film screen in Pasadena in 2008 on behalf of Amnesty International. I was very shocked when I watched this film, because just think about, like, this is the real life of a Chinese dissidents living in China. When he filmed, the city, the life, the restaurant, he could be arrested at any time. And as a matter of fact, like, Sun Yi was arrested because of this filming in 2016. And he had to escape China. He went to Indonesia by the end of 2016. And he was able to help Leon Lee to finish that documentary. But unfortunately, just like 2 months before the documentary was finished, it was the end of 2017, he suddenly died in Indonesia. It was very suspicious because he had been very healthy.
Right.
But one day he was suddenly ill, and he just died within like a couple of weeks. And according to the director and the people who finally saw him, they felt like he was very likely like he was poisoned. But it was so suspicious. But like
No
the local,
autopsy.
Well, China
Yeah.
still is very actively keeping people from getting into the internet. Like you said, the Great Firewall. They're still very active in blocking information. Even though information continues to get in there a little bit. But the average person in China, the average Chinese person, still is not getting it, right?
Yeah. Well, about 30% of internet users in China are able to bypass the Great Firewall. Of course, if you were caught, you'll be in big trouble.
Well, 30% of the internet users, but how many Chinese people use the internet?
Oh, many people
yeah,
use
a lot of
internet.
people.
That's a very
What's
high
the percentage?
percentage. Yeah.
It's a very high percentage, but China controls it drastically.
Yes, and nowadays the VPN, right? Like a Chinese government forbid people to use VPN. You can only use, but of course you cannot make a living. For like a scientist, you have to use
Right.
VPN to bypass. And then the solution of the Chinese government is that you must use government operated VPN so that they can monitor
Watch you.
which
Right.
website you went on.
What you're doing. They see Epic Times show up, you're in big trouble.
So that way they know where you're at if they have to send you to a retraining camp.
Yeah, like
right?
for example, like if American, right? If a professor, you go to China to give a speech, and you say I have to log into my Google account, then you have to use Chinese government VPN.
Yeah.
And then they can see what you're doing. But anyway, let's go back to the topic of labor camps in China. So after the labor camps were abolished, the Chinese government has been continue to persecute the dissidents by sentencing them directly to prisons. Of course, they have to go through the procedure, but it's called a show trial. So before the trial, they already decided how many years you're going to get in prison. So basically, it's a show trial. Oftentimes, it's not open to public. So they can have the trial in like a detention center. Say, okay,
anywhere.
midnight. Like, okay, we're done. Like you're taken to prison. And another way of less formal is like they put people in like schools. Like for example, they call it legal education school. So if you have problem like with the government, they send you to legal education school. They educate you until you change your opinion.
Wow.
And if you don't change your opinion, I'm sorry, they will say you have mental problem, and they send you to mental hospitals. And it's very sad, like because in China, mental hospitals were mostly used to detain dissidents, and they have a reason for that. Okay, you criticize the government, you must have mental problem. You have to be cured. Otherwise, you take medicine.
You're not thinking right.
Yeah, you're not thinking right. And yeah, it's very sad. And you probably have seen the news about Uyghurs, right? Like in
Yes,
Xinjiang, they
Right.
built like
Yeah.
a giant concentration camps. At the beginning, the Chinese government denied them, but then like they were so big, you can see them from satellite. About 1 million Uyghurs, Muslims were there.
Yeah,
They call like we are going to re-educate them, but then like people dug out what they buy for these re-education camps. Like they found, they ordered a ton of electric batons, like all this torture stuff. Oh, okay, we got it.
I was going to say
That's helpful in re-education.
I was going to say the three pictures we showed, right, that you brought in are very, how would you say, soft compared to the book that you showed me of the actual torture camps. I mean, it's really bad. I was actually going to show some of those and shock people. But the issue that America has is that the Chinese government has been so effective in their PR and brainwashing of the average American citizen. And even so much so that when the coronavirus broke out, you had a lot of the Democrat, the leadership, saying, well, it's not a Chinese virus. It's not a Wuhan virus. You're being racist, because they were saying people are going to start beating up Chinese people. And that is so bizarre because every flu, every disease that's ever come out, the point of origin is always the name of it, regardless of where it's come from. It has nothing to do with racism.
No, it doesn't.
And people don't beat somebody up because a pandemic started in their country. It's never happened in the past. And so the Chinese government has been so effective, though, in their PR in America. And Americans have been so, how would you say, prevented from getting real information because our press doesn't do it properly.
Right, because if I recall correctly, even though the virus started there, China had the lowest number of incidents, supposedly, or the lowest number of corona-related deaths. And we all know that's not accurate.
Yes. I would like to maybe eventually, as soon as the country opens up their stuff again, we can probably, how would you say, collaborate on doing a screening of that. I think that would be very good. And if we can even do the screening, how long is it?
It's 1 hour, 75 minutes.
75 minutes, okay.
Hour 15.
We might be able to do that and then do a Facebook screening of it.
Yeah.
I think people would learn quite a bit because the press and what's happening today is people really don't understand, I think, the plight of the Chinese people.
Yeah, I feel like the biggest problem is that the media don't want to separate the Communist Party from Chinese people. I always make it very clear. It's the Communist Party committed the crime. It's not Chinese people because we are also the victim.
Yep.
And also about human rights in China, right? Like when we talk about this, you may feel, oh, it's so far away from me. But when I read Sun Yi's story, like, he's just like my brother. Like he's the same age as my brother, and he had an engineer degree just like my brother. He liked, his hobbies were like sketching, like and watching movies. He said like in the interview, like he had been together with his wife for 20 years. Like they always went date like by going to a neighborhood restaurant to try new Chinese food, and then they went to watch movie. He's just like you and me, and all he did.
It's one human race. We got to remember that. It's only one human people. We're all the same. And with a closing thought, I think that the Chinese Communist Party has put the Chinese people in a very precarious position because of the coronavirus and the epidemic worldwide and the economy being destroyed in every country that it's touched. The repercussions to China are going to be vast. They're going to be strong. They're going to be hard. And you think about this, 1.5 billion people in China. Whatever repercussions happen, it's going to affect the well-being of the people of China. And so the Chinese Communist Party, in their complete desire for power and only power, world dominance, is using them as their pawn and their chip. So something has to happen, and this is what we're going to get into in the next episode with Gordon Chang, and discuss these very, very serious topics because the world can come to the rescue of the Chinese people, but it's going to have to be done very surgically. It's going to have to be done very compassionately, and it's going to have to front out the Communist Chinese Party for exactly what they are. Thank you once again for tuning in to The Voice of Reason. Please share it with your friends and family and pass it around. Ted, bring it on home.
And regarding to the movie we've been talking about, The Letter from Masanjia, if you are a member of Amazon Prime, you can watch it for free. It's included on the Amazon channel. Anyway, thanks again for tuning into the show. And remember, ignorance prevails when rational minds sit back and do nothing. Be sure to tune in next week.
You're listening to The Voice of Reason with Mark Reed and Ted Durden, only on LA Talk Radio.